Dear friends and colleagues, greetings for the day. Today we are going to see the scope 1 and 2 emission intensity reduction, that is greenhouse gases, under the ESG environment social governance and specifically BRSR report, that is business responsibility and sustainability report. Now under the principle number 6 of BRSR report, it says that respect and make efforts to protect and restore the environment. Under this, various intensities has been mentioned, like the implement drives for reduction in energy intensity from previous financial year, implement drives for reduction in water intensity with respect to previous financial year, and implement drives for reduction in scope 1 and scope 2 greenhouse gases emission intensity with respect to previous financial year, and initiate fuel substitution projects such as coal to briquette and furnace oil to pipe natural gas. But today in this slide or in presentation, we are going to focus on implement drives for reduction in scope 1 and scope 2 greenhouse gas emission intensity with respect to previous financial year. Now in the principle number 6 and BRSR format, under the essential indicators, they have said that provide details of greenhouse gas, that is GHG, scope 1 and scope 2 emission and its intensity in the following format. So they have given the below said format. So the first row says that total scope 1 emissions, breakup of greenhouse gases in CO2, methane, oxides of nitrogen, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluorides, NF3 and any others. So this you have to report in metric tons of CO2 or equivalent for the current financial year and previous financial year. Then again, total scope 2 emission, that is breakup of greenhouse gases in CO2, methane, oxides of nitrogen, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, SF6, NF3 if available in metric tons or equivalent of CO2 equivalent. Then you have to calculate the total scope 1 and 2 emission per rupee of turnover. You have to take the summation of this and divide it by the turnover of that financial year or previous financial year. You will get the intensity of scope 1 and emission intensity of scope 1 and scope 2. Then again they have given optional other than above metrics. If you want to report in other metrics, you have this row to report. Now under this leadership indicators, they have given if the entity has undertaken any specific initiative or used innovative technology or solution to improve resource efficiency or reduce impact due to emission, effluent discharge, waste generated, please provide the details of same as well as outcome of such initiative as per the format. So this format they have given whatever the initiative you have taken for reduction of scope 1 and scope 2 greenhouse gases, you have to mention here the details you have to give, and finally you have to quantify in some sort of units so that the reduction can be monitored, that is the expected. Now we will see in detail what is the scope emission under the scope 1 of greenhouse gases. Now scope 1 are nothing but the direct emissions. It should be remembered, it is the direct emissions. So scope 1 emissions are direct emission greenhouse gases from company owned and controlled resources. This is very important. The emissions of scope 1 resulting are from the company owned and controlled resources. In other words, the emissions are released in the atmosphere as a direct result of set of activities at a firm level. It is divided into 4 categories. These direct emissions scope 1 are divided into this below said 4 categories. The first is the stationary combustion. Examples: fuels, heating system, such that all the fuels that produce greenhouse gases emission must be included in scope 1. Then mobile combustion is all vehicles owned or controlled by the firm, such as burning of the fuels. Example: cars, vans, trucks. This has come in mobile combustion. Then fugitive emissions are the leaks from greenhouse gases such as refrigeration, air conditioning unit, it is important to know that refrigerant gas are 1,000 times more dangerous than CO2 emissions. So companies are encouraged to report these emissions. Then comes the process emissions are released during the industrial processes and on-site manufacturing. Example, production of CO2 during the cement manufacturing, factory fumes, chemicals and etc. So this is about the details under the scope 1 direct emissions, that is stationary combustion, mobile combustion, fugitive emissions and process emissions are part of the scope 1 direct emission. Now we will see the scope 2 emissions, that is indirect emissions owned by the company. So what are these scope 2 emissions? These are indirect emission from the generation of purchased energy from a utility provider. Means it is due to the purchase of electricity from any of the service provider, like in Maharashtra you have ECDL or previously MSEB. So whatever the electricity is being utilized or consumed from this utility service provider, it comes under the scope 2 emissions. In other words, all greenhouse gases emission released in the atmosphere from the consumption of the purchased electricity, steam, heat, or for heating and cooling are to be included in scope 2 emission. For most organizations, electricity will be the unique source of scope 2 emission. That I have already told that electricity is the scope 2 emissions. Simply stated, the energy consumed falls into the two scopes. Now scope 2 covers the electricity consumed by the end users, that is the factories. So generator is something someone, and the consumption is by the industries. So industry has to report the under the scope 2 regarding the indirect emissions. Then this is a pictorial representations of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 we are going to talk in different presentation. So scope 1 I have already told, it is a direct emission directly from the company facilities or outsourced facilities and company vehicles. So this should be the part of scope 1 direct emission in greenhouse gases. And scope 2 is the indirect emission, that is purchase electricity for generation of steam, heating and cooling, or for any own use. So these are the important factors of scope 1 and scope 2. So thank you friends for patiently listening to my presentation, and I request to keep on watching my presentation and subscribe my channel. Thank you.